MP Dennis Ryder has called for the former Deputy President David Mabuza to be charged for alleged corruption at Eskom. Ryder is one of the parliamentarians from the party who asked Mashatile questions in the National Council of Provinces today. Let's speak more now to MP Dennis Ryder. A very good evening to you, sir. Thank you for your time and for being on News at Prime. So, calls for charges against the former Deputy President. What credible evidence is there that he's involved or was involved in any corruption at Eskom?
Good evening, Timbakile. So, yes, my discussion with Mr. Mashatile today related specifically to his role on the Cabinet's committee that oversees justice. And I was asking him about the quick response that is being sought, particularly by the FATF, but generally by the whole of South Africa, to remind us and bring back the assurance that the rule of law remains paramount in South Africa. And we've seen a continual undermining of the rule of law in South Africa, and certainly a feeling that there is no equality before the law. So my question was quite carefully worded, and what I said to him is that South Africans are asking many questions. And amongst those questions, the one that you've highlighted now, that many South Africans are asking is, will Mr. David Mabuza face the might of the law before he manages to skip off and leave the country? Now, the reality is that at this stage, we're not sure, we're not convinced that there is sufficient evidence, but certainly South Africans have heard from Mr. Andre de Ruyter that there are serious allegations against people who have been involved in corrupt activities at Eskom over time. And of course, all fingers certainly point to Mr. David Mabuza. Now, my party leader, Mr. John Steenhuisen, asked a question of the President to ask if there would be further investigations. And Mr. Ramaphosa was a little bit, fluid in his response, I think, and unconvincing. So my question then was to Mr. Mashatile to try and evoke some sort of a response so that South Africans can feel and can be reassured that the rule of law does still exist in South Africa and that all of us are equal before the law.
But you'd agree then, Dennis, that it's still too soon at this stage to speak about the former Deputy President being charged for any corruption allegations, shall we say, at Eskom, because as things stand, there hasn't been anything substantial linking him to crimes committed at the utility, because even in the interview that Andre de Ruyter gave around February, he himself would not give names.
Absolutely, Timbakile. I think you're quite right, but the reality is that there have been investigations ongoing for quite some time, and if those investigations have not borne any fruit, then there's a problem with the investigators. But the reality is that we've been talking about these issues for quite some time. South Africans are asking the question. They are saying, what's going to happen here? Because we all know that there has been corrupt activity at Eskom. Whether it's David Mabuza or somebody else, we want to see some sort of action being taken. We want to see the law being used to make sure that South Africans can see justice. So, we are not privy to the investigations that have happened by the SIU, by the Hawks. We don't get to see that information as members of the public. Certainly the people that I represent, we're not on the inside. So I thought that it would be useful today to use my question to prompt the Deputy President and try and see if we could find out if there was a little bit more concrete evidence that had come through and where we would be going with this case and the several others that I mentioned.
Are those questions not better suited to the law enforcement agencies conducting the investigations into the allegations of corruption and other wrongdoing, given that they would be the ones to make an arrest, bring about charges, and not the President or his deputy?
Sure, absolutely, Timbakile. That was the point of the question. So if you listen to the full question, it did say that South Africans are talking about these specific issues, and we were looking to answers, for answers from the National Prosecuting Authority. Now, we're not seeing those answers coming through, and we're not seeing concrete actions being taken by the National Prosecuting Authority, certainly not in the public domain. And my question went back to the perceptions of the FATF and to most South Africans that we need to see high-level prosecutions actually starting to happen. So I'm not expecting the Deputy President to go out and investigate himself. I'm not expecting him to intervene in the investigations either, or to push. But my question was to ask him what he is doing in his role in the Cabinet Committee on Justice, Crime Prevention and Security, what he is doing to empower the NPA. Because in the first answer that he gave to the question, he merely said that his committee was putting pressure on the NPA. But we've heard repeatedly that the NPA has been hollowed out, it is under-resourced. And we do feel, therefore, that his role on that Cabinet Committee should be to assist the NPA so that they can be doing their job to the best of their ability. We don't expect the Deputy President to do the job, but his role is to make sure that the NPA is properly capacitated. And that was the thrust of the question.
And with that in mind, the issue of the incapacity of the National Prosecuting Authority and the other state agencies, I wonder how realistic it is at this point for any of us, as much as we all want to see action on these allegations of corruption, especially the ones that have emerged in the last while at Eskom and other institutions. It's likely going to take a long time, isn't it, realistically, when you consider that we've had Shamila Batoyi in position now for quite a few years. We're still yet to make any progress, for example, on the extradition of the Guptas. That appears to be collapsing. And there are other issues to do with the Estina Dairy Farm scandal, where even there, the pace of the process has not been as fast as many people would have wanted it to be. So with this new batch of allegations, we are likely, possibly based on what has happened in the last while, going to have to wait months or even years.
Absolutely, Timbukile, and I think that there's an old adage that says justice delayed is justice denied. And old adages are there for a reason. Normally, from good experience, they've been found to be true. And the fact is that what we've seen over time is the hollowing out of many of our state institutions, and one of those has been the National Prosecuting Authority. So, you know, there was a purpose behind, there was a reason why those institutions were hollowed out, and the NPA specifically was hollowed out to stop it from prosecuting these complex cases, and so they need to be recapacitated. We need to make sure that Parliament is appropriating sufficient funds and making sure that the right resources are given to institutions like the NPA, like the Hawks, to enable them to do their work and do it well. Because the reality is that we find these cases that are dragged out. We've seen the Stalingrad tactics that were utilized and called in by our erstwhile president, Mr. Jacob Zuma. And of course, because he could afford to pay expensive lawyers, most of them paid for by the state, up to a point. But of course, because he could afford those fancy lawyers, we saw the NPA undercapacitated and under-resourced,
Right.
and therefore unable to counter Mr. Zuma's challenges, and of course the challenges of others. So let's get the money through there. Let's make sure that they are properly capacitated, properly resourced, and properly funded.
And the final question to you then, Dennis Ryder. We're expecting Andre de Ruyter, the former Eskom CEO, to appear virtually before the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Many MPs have said he should come forward from across the political spectrum to provide clarity on the allegations he made in that television interview just before his departure. Do you expect, though, that all parliamentarians who are part of SCOPA, regardless of political party affiliation, will be able to pull in the same direction as far as getting to the bottom of the allegations, when you consider, A, that de Ruyter basically made an allegation against the ANC. The ANC demanded an apology or detail to support his allegations of corruption and threatened legal action. So the likes of yourselves as the opposition already say that the parties involved in corruption, and not just Eskom but other SOEs. So you're going into this divided, basically, as members of parliament.
Absolutely, and I think that question would probably be better directed to my colleagues who sit on the SCOPA committee. But realistically, I think we've seen the African National Congress use their majority in parliament time and again to ensure that their views and their interests are protected. And I can't see anything different happening here. So it is going to be a challenge, and it will certainly be an interesting committee to watch, Timbekile.
Dennis Ryder, DA Member of Parliament, thank you so much for your time tonight.